From the outside, my suburban life seemed perfect. A large house with a spacious backyard, a pristine pool sparkling in the sun, a hard-working husband, and a 20-year-old son about to graduate from college. But behind closed doors, things weren't as idyllic as they appeared. My husband, Michael, spent most of his time at work, and when he was home, he was engrossed in his phone or the television. The warmth we once shared had faded over the years, leaving me feeling invisible in my own marriage. It was a Saturday afternoon in early summer when I first truly noticed Marcus. He was my son, Eric's best friend, a polite, confident young man who had been coming over to hang out for months. I hadn't paid him much attention before, but that day something shifted. Eric had invited Marcus to swim in our backyard pool. From the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of them through the sliding glass door. Marcus stood at the pool's edge, his physique catching the sunlight. He dove into the water, resurfacing with a grin. For a moment, I couldn't look away. It wasn't just his appearance, it was his confidence, his demeanor, so different from my husband's distant and preoccupied air. I felt a strange, unfamiliar stirring within me. I brushed off the feeling and turned back to the dishes, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Over the next few weeks, Marcus began spending more time at our house. He and Eric worked out in our garage, played video games, and sometimes just relaxed by the pool. Each time Marcus was around, I found myself acutely aware of his presence. One afternoon, while Eric ran to the store, Marcus came inside for a drink. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mrs. Blake, do you mind if I grab some water?" Marcus asked, his voice startling me. "Of course, Marcus," I replied, trying to sound casual. "And please, call me Amanda." He smiled. "Thanks, Amanda." As he reached for a glass, our hands accidentally brushed. It was a small, fleeting moment, but it sent a jolt through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, hoping he hadn't noticed my reaction. "Sorry about that," he said with a chuckle. "It's fine," I murmured, my cheeks flushing. After he left the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, trying to regain my composure. What was happening to me? I was a married woman in her 40s, yet here I was, flustered by a young man. Later that evening, I sat by the pool after everyone had gone to bed. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its gentle ripples mirroring the turmoil in my heart. I couldn't deny it any longer. There was something about Marcus that drew me in, something I couldn't explain or control. I told myself it was just a harmless infatuation, something that would fade with time. But deep down, I suspected it was more than that. I resolved to put these feelings aside. I was a wife and a mother. I had a family to protect. But even as I made that promise, I couldn't help but wonder, what if? I tried to ignore the feelings, to bury them under the routines of my daily life, but Marcus made it impossible. His presence filled our home, his laughter echoing through the walls, his scent lingering in the air. A week after that night by the pool, things took a turn. Eric and Marcus were playing basketball in our driveway, their shirts off in the summer heat. I had opened the living room window to let in some air, and their playful banter drifted inside. I tried to focus on folding laundry, but my eyes kept drifting to Marcus. When they finished playing, Eric ran inside, leaving Marcus on the porch with a bottle of water. He caught me watching through the window and smiled, not just a friendly smile, but one that felt knowing, as if he could see right through me. My heart raced, and I quickly looked away, pretending to busy myself with the laundry. "Nice day, isn't it?" Marcus's voice startled me. He was standing just outside the window, leaning against the frame. "Yes, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You should come outside more, Amanda. Get some sun," he said, his tone light, but with an underlying edge. "I'm fine right here, but thank you," I said, forcing a smile before turning away. But his words lingered in the air, more of a challenge than a suggestion. Later that evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. Marcus walked in, his footsteps soft on the tile. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "No, I've got it," I replied, avoiding his gaze. But he didn't leave. Instead, He leaned against the counter, watching me. You work too hard, you know that? I paused, a plate in my hand, forgotten. No one had said anything like that to me in years. It's just what I do, I said with a shrug. Well, maybe someone should take care of you for a change, he said, his eyes locking with mine. My breath caught. There it was again. That spark, that unspoken connection between us. I knew I should walk away, say something to end this, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in his gaze. Before I could respond, Eric came into the room, breaking the spell. Marcus straightened up, his easy smile returning. Thanks for dinner, Mrs. Blake, he said before walking out with Eric, but his words hung in the air, heavier than I wanted to admit. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and fleeting touches. In the kitchen, our hands brushed again, and this time, neither of us pulled away immediately. Another time, while walking past him in the hallway, his arm grazed mine, sending a shiver down my spine. I knew this was dangerous. I was walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could destroy everything. But the more I tried to resist, the more I found myself drawn to him. One afternoon, while Eric was out running errands, Marcus stayed behind. I was sitting on the patio sipping iced tea when he joined me. Mind if I sit? He asked. Of course not, I replied, trying to sound casual. For a while we sat in silence, the only sounds the chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic. Then he turned to me. You seem different lately. Everything okay? I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Just a lot on my mind, I said finally. If there's anything I can do. His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment, I felt something shift. It wasn't just physical attraction anymore. It was a longing, a need to feel seen and understood. That evening, Michael had stepped outside to take a phone call, and Eric was upstairs showering after their swim. Marcus and I were alone in the kitchen, the tension between us thick. I can't do this anymore, I whispered, my voice trembling. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. You don't mean that. I do, I insisted, though my resolve wavered as he looked at me. This is wrong, Marcus. It has to stop. Before he could respond, the back door opened, and Michael walked in. For a moment, I thought we'd managed to compose ourselves, but then his eyes narrowed, flicking between Marcus and me. What's going on here? He asked, his tone sharp. Nothing, I said quickly, my voice too high-pitched to be convincing. Michael's gaze lingered on me, then shifted to Marcus. Eric's friend or not, you better explain yourself, kid. Marcus hesitated, but before he could speak, Eric appeared in the doorway, his hair still damp from the shower. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Then, to my horror, Michael turned to Eric. How well do you really know your friend, son? Dad, what are you talking about? Eric asked, frowning. Michael didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of suspicion and hurt. Amanda, is there something you want to tell me? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. It was Marcus who finally broke the silence. Mr. Blake, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Don't lie to me, Michael roared, slamming his hand down on the counter. The room erupted into chaos. Eric demanded answers, Marcus tried to explain, and Michael turned his fury on me. By the time the dust settled, the truth was out. Eric stormed out of the house, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Marcus left shortly after, his usual confidence replaced by a look of shame. Michael and I were left alone in the kitchen, the silence between us deafening. How long? He asked finally, his voice hollow. I couldn't meet his eyes. A few weeks, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. A few weeks with our son's best friend? God, Amanda, what were you thinking? I wasn't, I said, tears streaming down my face. I was lonely, Michael. You've been so distant. Don't you dare blame this on me, he snapped. You made this choice, not me. He stormed out, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. The aftermath was a nightmare. Eric refused to speak to me, and Michael moved into the guest room. The house felt like a war zone, every interaction charged with anger and hurt. Marcus stopped coming around, and I couldn't blame him. His friendship with Eric was over, and any chance of repairing my family seemed impossible. I spent my days trying to piece my life back together, but the damage was done. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Months later, I'm still living with the consequences of my actions. Michael and I are in therapy, though it's unclear if our marriage will survive. Eric has started to forgive me, but our relationship will never be the same. As for Marcus, he's moved on. I saw him once at a coffee shop, and we exchanged a brief, awkward glance before he turned and walked away. I've learned a hard lesson. A moment of weakness can destroy a lifetime of trust. Life is full of choices, and some can change everything in an instant.